Did you know that there's actually no such thing as certainty in science? I'm not trying to demonize science, but it's important to separate facts from myths. Even some of the treatments we depend on every day are still kind of a mystery. But before we dive into that, let's hear what Sam Harris has to say about science.
Certainty is I think, a false goal. I mean, we're achieving functional certainties in science and in just in our day-to-day lives. I mean, it's a functional certainty that I'm sitting here talking to you, though it's possible I could be dreaming or deceived by an evil demon. I mean, those kinds of philosophical, epistemological worries don't really relate too much to the ordinary practice of science, the very useful practice of science, and our ordinary task of just negotiating our lives and finding happiness in this world. We recognize that there's a range, there's a continuum of, I'm not sure, it's a coin toss, 50-50 understanding of a circumstance to being functionally certain about what is so. And many people are pretending to be functionally certain or believe themselves to be functionally certain about things like Jesus is going to come back and judge the world in their lifetime. I mean, 20% of the American population claims to be functionally certain that that is going to come to pass, and 78% think that Jesus is going to come back sometime, not necessarily in their lifetime. And these certainties do real work for us. I mean, the person who's certain that the soul enters the zygote at the moment of conception is the person who wants to veto stem cell research, despite the fact that tens of millions of people are suffering conditions for which stem cell research is the best line of research to generate therapies. So these are ideas that are not just of academic interest or personal, private, spiritual relevance. I mean, these are shaping policy. They're shaping a national conversation. And then when you look to the Muslim world, they are causing people to blow themselves up on street corners.
Harris talks about functional certainties, but honestly, we can drop the fancy terms. What he means is that science also deals with uncertainties. Certainty has driven both great good and terrible harm. Religious conviction, especially from Christians, has historically fueled movement like the abolition of slavery and civil rights. Certainty in the dignity of human life led to positive change. Also, if you think Christianity is about being 100% certain, then you might want to rethink that, because it would imply we fully understand God's plans, which we don't. If you're interested in more on that topic, check out my YouTube shorts where I dive deeper into this idea. I'll link it in the description. And when he mentions the soul entering the zygote, it is a logical fallacy known as strawman. No one knows exactly how the connection between the body and soul works, but we do know is that it's way more complex than Harris lets on. Addressing what Sam Harris said about Jesus' second coming, most Christians don't claim to know when it'll happen. Jesus even said no one knows. This belief often motivates people to do good, not to drive extreme policies. Now let's consider how much we really understand about the science we rely on every day. There's a kind of a dogma around science. Often people assume it has all the answers, but even some of the most common treatments we use are still wrapped in mystery. Take, for example, general anesthesia. We use anesthesia to knock you out for surgery, yet scientists still don't fully grasp how it actually works on the brain. We know it works, but the underlying mechanisms? Not so much. Antidepressants, or SSRIs, they're prescribed to help people manage depression, but here's the kicker. We're not entirely sure why they work for some people, but fail for others. The exact science remains elusive. Even more puzzling is the placebo effect. Patients can experience real improvements from nothing more than a sugar pill. How does the mind manage to heal the body without active medication? We're still searching for that answer. We know that sleep is essential for our health, but the exact reasons why our bodies and brains need sleep and what happens during the sleep that makes it restorative are still not fully understood. We can describe the stages of sleep, but the underlying purpose and mechanisms remain elusive. Gravity. While we can predict and measure the effects of gravity with great precision, the true nature of gravity is still not fully understood. We don't really know why gravity works the way it does or how it fits into a unified theory of the universe, hence why scientists are still working on reconciling gravity with quantum mechanics. I mean, I can go on and on. That proves science is filled with uncertainties. So while we trust science for the outcomes it produces, we have to remember it's still an incomplete puzzle, just like everything else. And to be clear, I'm not here to demonize science. I'm just saying science is not the final answer on everything. So if science isn't all about facts, what kind of world do we live in? The truth is we don't live in a world purely based on facts.
The first reason why I care about the miracles that are described in the Bible is because of what they afford. is because of what they reveal about reality and
Yeah.
what they make possible to participate in.
I have no doubt that they have incredible lessons. My question is just, do you believe in them or not? And your answer, I'm not clear on your answer.
My answer is yes. My answer is I do
Did
believe
it-
it.
But in terms of, did they happen? Like,
They
did your-
happened, and the way they're described is the best way you could describe them for us to
So-
care about
so
them.
my
and remember them.
my question is, how do you know they happened?
How do you know that anything happened before your
Here's
life?
here's how you know. So
How do you know that anything happened outside of your own experience?
Well, yeah, so we have an accepted tradition of like the reason we know
We
that
have an accepted tradition.
yeah,
Just repeat after you because it's
Yeah.
the same.
we have sure like
You trust certain authorities to consolidate reality for you, and you accept what those authorities have given you to be history, to be the experience outside of yours. All experience outside of yours is mediated by trust.
No, I'll be really concise because I've thought about this, and I think that the way that we know, let's say for example, that George Washington was the first president, or that Christopher Columbus sailed across the ocean, or that the Mayans had this thriving civilization, is that we have a certain threshold for evidence, and if we find a fossil of a dinosaur and then another fossil, we put them together and we say we think dinosaurs existed, and so I'm not a scientist, but the scientific process dictates that if you meet a certain threshold of evidence, and that evidence has like hard to find criteria, then we know that dinosaurs existed, that the earth is round, that Christopher Columbus, all these things. And so that's the answer to your question of how do we know something existed before the lifetime? There's a threshold of evidence with the parameters set by the scientific method. And if that threshold is met, that's how we form scientific conclusions. And if you say to me, hey, I think 500 years ago, human beings had wings and could fly, I would say, show me the evidence. And if and maybe you could show me evidence, like maybe there's some drawing somewhere, but unless that evidence met the threshold prescribed by the scientific method, I would say it falls short. I don't buy it. I don't believe you that people could fly. Do you believe that there is?
I'm not sure how to answer your question.
Yeah. Do you believe that the way we ascertain truth about the paths, it has to do with a certain threshold of evidence?
Okay, so Jake is making a really common point here. He's saying that we need a certain threshold of evidence to believe something happened in the past. Fossils, ancient manuscripts, scientific tests, and yeah, that's how we verify a lot of things. He trusts science because it meets this evidence-based threshold, which is fine, until you ask, what about the stuff you can't directly verify? How do you trust that the evidence wasn't manipulated or misrepresented? Do you personally see every fossil, hold every artifact, or read every ancient text?
No, I think that's
No.
bullshit. I think it's
Really?
nonsense.
Do you think so?
It's actually not how you ascertain truth, both either in your life and because, okay, how about this? Let me push you this way.
Yeah.
So how do you know that the people who are presenting that evidence to you aren't lying, Jake?
So
Have you seen the evidence yourself? Let me ask you that. Have you
Yeah,
seen
sure.
the evidence yourself? Did you hold the archaeological piece in your hand? Did you read the ancient
no,
manuscript?
but I could,
You
but
trust them, right? You
but I
trust
could.
them?
Well,
You-
yeah,
You trust them.
yeah.
Well, that's the answer, man. The answer
Okay.
is trust. That's how it works.
Yeah.
It actually is held in trust. And so we have witnesses of things happening in the first century, witnesses that we trust, that I trust, and I trust those witnesses, and therefore I believe that it happened.
Yeah.
So we
but
have
there's-
multiple witnesses that
Yeah.
have experienced something, and I trust that it happened.
Got it.
And I trust it happened not because of the witnesses,
Yeah.
but because of what it affords me.
You're right.
Because you're confusing things together. You're confusing a raw like evaluation
Mhm.
of a fact or an event and something which is not only a fact or an event, like, did you drop your pencil on the ground today? And then
Yeah.
I could have filmed it or whatever. But
Mhm.
we're talking about something which is civilization affording,
Yeah.
which is world affording, which basically is at the origin of an entire world.
Yeah.
And so how can I say this? It's like, let me ask you this. So let me ask you another a question that's related to this, which is
Yeah.
that, so for, let's say around 1,000 years, at least 1,000 years, right? Everybody in Europe believed certain things to have happened.
Right.
Right. And then at some point, someone started to try to disprove that they happened. What
Yeah.
is their motivation?
pursue truth, and if they find new information that proves it wrong, that they want to pursue the truth and what's real.
And how could you do that about something that was witnessed by 12 people 2,000 years ago?
If you find evidence that so for example, if 12 people 2,000 years ago said, hey, we saw a person flying with angel wings, and then you're able to somehow disprove it, but it's hard to disprove that. I mean, people say a lot of crazy things, and so that's why the threshold for whether something is true is not whether 12 people said it, it's whether there's evidence of it.
But that's not how you live. That's a lie. You're giving yourself an illusion of the way that you exist.
What do you mean?
So how can you prove that your wife loves you?
Think about it. Can you prove your wife loves you? You trust in the relationship, the shared experiences, the emotions. It's not something you can dissect under a microscope or prove in a lab. The same goes for a lot of what we believe about the world. Trust plays a bigger role than people like Jake are willing to admit. And this applies to the Bible and historical events in Christianity. We trust the evidences of these events not because we have a 4K video of the resurrection, but because we trust the integrity of the testimony and the meaning those events carry. It's not about cold forensic facts. It's about something much bigger. It's about understanding reality and trusting in the deeper truth those events reveal.
But I'm not. So,
how can you prove
no, I
that?
can't.
Like,
no,
that
wait, so let me.
You can't prove the things that the world that you live in is not based. Your world that you live in is based on trust, Jake.
Right.
It is not based on facts. The facts are not accessible to you.
Scientific reality and history, I think, is based on facts. The way my wife.
Scientific reality is not the gospel story. And it's not the Bible. The Bible is not a scientific document. It doesn't try to be, doesn't pretend to be. All the ancient stories do not pretend to be scientific documents. They're not forensic descriptions of events, and they also don't have to be, because that's not the point. The point is not to convince, is not to in a forensic manner, predict a phenomena the way that science is able to analyze and predict phenomena with like levels of facts that are necessary for that to happen. But that's not the world you live in. You don't live in that world.
I'm not going to win this argument.
Wow. I'm not going to win this argument. What's wrong with Jake's stance is that he's framing the conversation as an argument to win, rather than recognizing the complex layers of how people ascertain truth in areas like history, relationships, and religion. When Jonathan asks how Jake knows the people presenting the evidence aren't lying or mistaken, Jake admits he just trusts them. And that's the whole point Jonathan is making. We all live in a world built on trust, and that's the same reason Christians trust the Bible and the testimonies about Jesus. It's not just about cold hard evidence, it's about trust in the witnesses and what those events afford us. So if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell icon so you don't miss out future videos. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.